Hello and welcome to another edition of the Formula One Fans UK podcast. I'm Reese and I'm joined today by...
Just Tim this week.
Just Tim. Tim, that's Tim, not Justin. We haven't got a Justin. We're not that cool. The Formula One World Championship has finally been won by Max Verstappen. We're not surprised. We called it in Spain. So well done, Max, and well done, Jos, for leaving me at a gas station. We never know what could have happened if you weren't such a terrible father.
Oh, come on. He's raised a child that's won 3 F1 titles. If it took leaving him at a gas station, I'd do that to my son if it wins him 3 world titles.
Well, a member of the podcast is missing today because he's dealing with father duties. We've just said, Dan, next time leave the kids at a gas station, you'll be fine. Well, they'll be fine.
But yes, well done, Max. It's a shame that Perez couldn't have won the sprint race and taken it to the last race of the year by winning everything else. But
and Max not finishing anything. Yeah, that would have been good. Yeah.
But they could have swapped Liam Lawson in for the rest of the season, couldn't they?
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Can Max win in an Alpha Tauri? There's the moment of truth.
Well, no, Max can just take the rest of the season off now, can't he? There's no more European races, so the Orange Army isn't going to be anywhere.
Well, he's going to have to race in Brazil.
Oh yes, of course he will.
Yeah.
I don't think the in-laws would be very happy if he didn't.
Yeah, and I mean all the other races he'll have to be at because now Oscar Piastri's a race winner. Kelly Piquet's going to be after him.
I saw that meme. That was rather funny.
Anyway,
and
yeah,
we're
well done,
off
Max.
the air in Brazil.
Yeah, we're off the air in Brazil. It's okay. We all know our favourite Brazilian is Lewis Hamilton.
No, Felipe, baby.
Felipe, you're not my favourite Brazilian, but I'm sure in 12 years' time you'll take it to court, so you make sure that I am, or you
are. The sarcastic comments are flowing, aren't they? Yes, well done, Max. 3 world titles, the most convincing and most dominant, let's say,
since
of the 3. Oh, I was going to say of the 3 that he won, but
well, that's of the 3 that he won. Do you mean cost cap gate, Massey gate, and then this one, which he's actually won, convincingly with the help of the fact that they are a 1-car team.
I would argue that this one is still cost cap gate.
They're all cost cap gate. They're all cost cap gate until 2026 because they got an unfair advantage from spending too much money in year 1. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that.
What's the argument that I saw? It doesn't count as a championship because he won it on a sprint race. Embrace the sprint races.
Yeah, I like the sprint race. The sprint race is good. Tim, who's the only other driver to win the championship on a Saturday?
Oh, it's going to be back in the days when they had 1 point for a fastest lap on a Saturday. Are we going right back to the start of the sport, like the 50s?
We're not going that far back, no.
Oh, okay. Let's go Niki Lauda.
No, it was Nelson Piquet.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. So yes, we'll talk about the sprint race. But before we get onto the sprint race, there's a few bits we need to talk about that happened before the sprint race. Qualifying for the main Grand Prix. It was dominated by track limits. Both McLarens having lap times deleted when they were flying. They were the only ones who could challenge Verstappen this weekend. And Norris got 2 lap times deleted in Q3, which led to him starting 10th. But then it turns out the driver shouldn't have been going that wide anyway, because the tyre manufacturer of Formula One, Pirelli, couldn't make tyres that were sufficient to deal with the track conditions, temperature, all of that. Just what you expect from the sole tyre manufacturer of the world's premier 4-wheeled motorsport.
I will give Pirelli some defence here, because I don't know about the narrowing of the tracks that they did prior to sprint qualifying. Was it before sprint qualifying?
Before sprint qualifying, they narrowed the track at turns 12 and 13 by 80 centimetres. Or if you're Logan Sargent, they narrowed the track by the width of around 1 washing machine.
Don't shit on Logan. He might have been the one that saved a major incident. Or imagine if one of the drivers who had been kept going for the whole of that race had
we'll get
fainted or
onto
passed
this.
out at the end.
We'll get onto this.
Let's not go for
We'll,
loads.
we'll,
Anyway, it's
we'll,
back to
we'll-
go to the sprint qualifying.
yeah. But yeah, they narrowed the track. You're saying you're going to try and defend Pirelli, but I'm sorry, I won't defend Pirelli because they knew that this track was hard on tyres from 2020 when they raced in Qatar. And what happened? 2021. And what happened? Well, there were late tyre failures. Bottas, most notably, had a late tyre failure. They know this track's hard on tyres, and they've come back at a point of the year where conditions are much more extreme on the tyres, on the drivers, on the cars, everything. And they narrowed the track because they had concerns about tyre wear. They said it was because of the curbs. But what then happened after the sprint race was further concerns where they then lowered the maximum use of a tyre to 18 laps.
Yeah. So I'm going to defend Pirelli a little bit. Tyre wear and the surface of the tyre under the G-forces was not the issue. What was the concerning issue is something that they've never come across before, which was the new curbing that has been laid on the Qatar circuit. They were being called the concrete pyramids or the concrete Toblerones, which, as you can imagine, at 150, 170 miles an hour through some of those faster corners, if you're driving over concrete Toblerones or running your tyres up against the edge of a concrete Toblerone, the sidewall of your tyre is going to take a big impact. And these types of curves have never really been used on an F1 circuit before. And it wasn't a worry that the tyre wear would fall away in the heat, that the tyres would structurally fail from the point of view of the G-forces and the tyre wear. It was the actual contact of the concrete on the sidewall of the tyre that was the concerning issue.
Yes, but then you have what the drivers were saying, which is get rid of the sleeping policeman, put these curbs in Austria.
Well, maybe we know why they were never put in Austria.
Well, I feel like Pirelli, they would have known. And
I do agree with you that Pirelli should have researched beforehand, because it's not like the FIA World Championships haven't driven their on Pirelli tyres since the track was redone.
Yeah, they can say they're an absolute mess. I say bring back a tyre war. This was the biggest tyre fast we've seen since that day in Indianapolis. And
didn't the FIA and F1 deal with it so much better than that day in Indianapolis?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that was only because no one could agree on putting a chicane in.
Because we got a full race on the pre-agreed layout of the circuit. Yes, with 80 centimetres difference, but not massively different layout. And we got a full race in. And you know what? Who didn't love seeing Alex Albon lead a lap?
Well, by the end of the race, I don't think Alex Albon felt too great about it. But anyway, we'll go back to the
sprint race.
We'll go back to the sprint race because my goodness, what a sprint race it was! Bit of carnage always helps. A rare mistake by Liam Lawson, of course, kicked off the safety car proceedings. Then Logan Sargent doing what all Americans, struggle with, turning right and going off. He lost it in the wind, and the wind and dirty air was an issue. But then that doesn't really come close to what was the third safety car, where when we watched this for the first time, the initial thoughts were, for goodness sake, Perez, what have you done this time?
I was wondering, what has Nico Hülkenberg done to Perez in a previous life after recent weeks?
It was, you got torrid luck, but then the damage, of course, led to Perez having to start from the pit lane in the main Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri, oh man, the kid's good.
Falling in love with him. It's just, he's quickly becoming one of my favourites on the grid.
He's full of talent, a lot of charisma, and it stings that he's beating Lando to the first win, even if it is just a sprint race. Oh, it's blooming nice when someone beats Verstappen. I don't care.
But he was so composed. You got Max Verstappen bearing down on you. Yes, maybe not had the best of starts to the race, Verstappen, with the wheel spin, but he's bearing down on you in that car that has been so much quicker over so much of the season than everything else on circuit. And he didn't put a foot wrong. We'll get onto the main race as well. Just all weekend, the lap that got him the sprint pole was probably one of the best laps of the weekend by any driver. I missed the sprint shootout live, but I did get to watch that lap back.
Oh, it was a phenomenal lap.
Yeah, it had to be to beat Max in that Red Bull.
But also the intelligence of him. In the safety car periods in the sprint race, do you know what he was doing?
No.
He was cleaning his grid spot. He was going down the right-hand side of the track to clean his grid spot. Only one other driver did that.
I did not see that at all. Are you sure he just wasn't trying to break the toe?
No, it was only under the safety car. Under the safety car, he and one other driver, Fernando Alonso, who we know is a chuffing genius, absolutely, just his experience is well ahead of his age.
Yep, he's a real talent, and I think that this is the start for him, isn't it? It's fantastic to see, and I know that Lando hasn't won one yet, but Piastri is going to be looking at these remaining Grand Prix and thinking, we are getting so close to that Red Bull now. Any slip up, any mistake, and I could be the ones to really take advantage on a Sunday.
But this has been huge this weekend for McLaren. They are absolutely going to take fourth place in the World Championship, in my opinion. There's no doubt about that. They're against a one-car team in Aston Martin. The performance of Piastri and Norris, it's so consistent. It's 3 podiums in a row for Norris now?
Yep, and 2 for Piastri.
2 for Piastri. It's incredible to see how McLaren have turned it around. When you think,
2 in 3 races for Piastri, because he didn't get one at Singapore, did he? Oh no, he got one at Suzuka.
He got one at Suzuka.
I forgot
so 2 in a row.
Existed.
How dare you? It's blasphemy in these Tabats.
There's been a lot going on.
But yeah, Piastri, fantastic. Norris, equally brilliant, just without as much success. But McLaren, I tell you what, that I've not seen a turnaround like this in quite some time. I mean, Mercedes struggled at the start of last year. We know that. And they went on to win a race. They were nowhere near as off the pace as what McLaren were in Bahrain. But to think where McLaren come from in Bahrain, there's not been an improvement like that. And if it carries on into next season, we could have an absolute belter on our hands. Because these kids don't back down against Verstappen. That's the other thing that we've seen, which is fantastic.
Yeah, shall we move on to Sunday?
Let's move to Sunday. Sunday's race. Pros and cons of the 18-lap format. Pros, it meant the drivers had to do qualifying laps for 57 laps. Cons, they were doing it in conditions which were completely unsuitable for doing 57 qualifying laps.
It was a tough old day out there, wasn't it, on the Sunday, with the length of the race and the constant high G-force of the high speed. I think there's only one corner that's 4th gear on this circuit, and every other corner is 5th gear or higher.
That corner being George Russell corner.
Oh, yeah, some great moves from Georgie Russell.
Great move. Big move, that one. Big move, that.
Yeah, again, and we'll get onto this later, passing Sergio Perez through there.
He passed half the grid through there.
Yeah, was it turn 6, the left-hander?
Turn 6, yes, the left-hander. But anyway, there are some really big concerns here, which the FIA are having to deal with, and have said that they are looking into it and trying to figure out what they can do. Not racing in the Middle East at one of the hottest points of the year is probably one of the better ways to go about avoiding these situations.
Can I just run through? I've got a list here of the drivers that we know. So Esteban Ocon threw up in his helmet on lap 15. So he drove 42 laps with thick flowing around his helmet.
Well, it's probably just trapped on the inside of his balaclava, but not pleasant.
I would argue that's even worse.
Yeah, I'd say that's much worse.
Yeah, so 42 laps of thick in his helmet. Then obviously we had Logan Sargent. I felt so sorry for him. He's in a position where he's driving for his career, and you heard the anguish in his voice and the desire that he wanted to keep going. I think we all agree, right?
Retired with heat stroke. He retired with heat stroke.
Yeah, and also again stick in his visor, which did not look very nice when they showed the FIA TV director, whoever you are, or F1 TV director. When a man is seriously ill and has just been fighting for his career, don't give us a close-up of his face from the inside of his cockpit. It was not a nice sight to see, and he probably won't like seeing those pictures shared all around the world as he's fighting for his career.
Yeah, he's fighting for his career. Has he not been renewed?
No, he hasn't yet.
He's not been renewed yet. Wow.
Nope. James Vowles wants him to be removed, but he said Logan's got to show them something in the next 5 races. So we'll move on to the next person, which was... Who else was it? After the finish line, Lance Stroll, after the race, pulled up next to an ambulance, walked straight over to the ambulance crew, said he didn't feel well, and was then, I believe, taken to the medical centre as well.
Well, we say walk straight over. It was the slowest walk straight over I've ever... I mean, remember when Hamilton hurt his back in Baku?
Yes.
It took Lance Stroll longer to get out of the car than it did Hamilton then when he couldn't stand. He was leaning over, hands on the tyres, and goes over to an ambulance.
Yeah. What you then had in the pre-drivers room, you had Oscar Piastri and actually Max Verstappen when he first went in there, both laying on the floor, and they were both saying how exhausted they were.
Lando didn't look well either.
Yeah, I think Lando took longer to get in there, so maybe he's gone. No,
Lando was in the chair when Verstappen came in.
Oh, was he already? Piastri was definitely first in there and on the floor when the other two arrived. But yeah, it was a tough old day. There's been rumours about 1 or 2 others that went as well. Alex Albon reported himself to the medical centre.
Did you see him trying to get out of the car?
Yeah, he had to be helped.
He couldn't get out on his own.
Yeah, he had to be helped out of the car. Saw somewhere that Gasly wasn't in a good way. Fernando Alonso had a burning bottom, which, although maybe
I don't know.
Radio,
I don't know if he was burning with the temperatures of the car or burning with envy over Travis Kelce stealing his girl. Poor Fernando. He'll shake it off.
Oh God, we're not back to anything again, are we?
We're back to that. No, we're not back to this. No, but it brought up a good point. That Fernando Alonso wants to be cooled down. The team aren't even allowed to throw water on you anymore because it's classed as adding extra weight to the car.
Oh, it would have been evaporated within a couple of seconds.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have made much difference to him. It was a very, very hot day. I'm sure there will be 1 or 2 other drivers who reported in sick that we haven't been told about as well. Lando Norris said that several of them were ill in his written media press conference.
Well, yeah, I wonder. Now, I don't want to make excuses for him because he's had a torrid time of it, but I wonder if Checo was one of those, because I can't see how George Russell could come through the field as well as he did, but Checo struggled as much as he did to come through the field. And it wasn't like, it did seem like he was making progress at first, and then it just stopped.
Yeah, you're tickling the nerve here, Reece. I really want to go with this.
Yeah, well, let's just wrap up
we'll wrap up the heat and then we'll have a go at Checo.
Yeah, there's it's a concern when it happens as much, or it happened to as many drivers as it happened to. I think Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton probably feel like they dodged a bullet. Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I look at how many drivers struggled. Lance Stroll said that the dizziness was the reason for his frequent late race penalties, which of course
Perez he said he had blurred vision on the exits of several of the corners coming out of the G-forces, which you do not want to hear from any driver.
Yeah, because Perez and Gasly all picked up multiple penalties, I believe, late in the race. It's not good. One thing that was raised was, how comes IndyCar can put these cooling ducts on? Well, the reason that IndyCar had these cooling ducts is because they had the aeroscreen rather than the halo. There is no natural ventilation. You can't be George Russell and putting your hands on the wheel down the straight to try and get some air into your suit.
Yeah, Esteban Ocon said he did that as well several times. You had drivers opening their visors, multiple of them opening their visors on their way down the pit lane. There was a video of Lando doing it. There was even a video of Max just unclipping his visor when they came in for the final set of pit stops to try and get some air into the cockpit or into their faces.
Oh, so Max Verstappen said how much he struggled, and he said there are drivers who are much fitter than him who looked in an even worse way. Yeah. So
we are going there 7 weeks later next year. We're going there in the last week of November.
1st of December is the race.
1st of December is the race, yeah. And when they were in Qatar last time, it was the last week of November and it was cooler. But you're in the middle of the desert, so there's only so much heat that's going to be lost. And changing the wind, changing the airflow, and even next year, you could be looking at things like that. It's something the FIA will definitely have to look at.
It's something, Tim, that we managed to look at, and when I say we, I mean myself, Dan, and the American, when we put together a calendar, and we had a bit of a debate on South Africa, and we said you'd have to do it in November because of the weather.
Yeah.
It's amazing how three guys can sit in their armchairs and record a podcast, and the same thought process doesn't seem to go through the people who organise the F1 calendar. Now, I can't think which big financial factor might influence that decision, but hopefully it's a wake-up call to them that, without these drivers.
I don't know if we're looking at regionalising the races, could you stick it with the Bahrain and the Saudi Grand Prix in February or March rather? And
I'd happily do a blooming Middle Eastern cluster to get them out of the way. Plus, I quite like this track. I think it lends itself to good racing naturally, just like Bahrain. Saudi Arabia, good racing, despite the fact it's all artificial. And, I mean, Abu Dhabi, well, at least they improved it slightly. Get those four out the way, and then let us have a proper season finale in
Brazil. Or Suzuka.
Brazil,
although
Suzuka.
We're probably too late into the wet season in Suzuka now for a season finale.
Yeah, I mean, although we nearly did get a title decider in Suzuka, thanks to Perez's lack of ability from Miami. Anyway, Tim, shall we talk about Sergio? Because you've got a few things to say here, and I'm going to have to try and play the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, we're going to have to play good cop and bad cop, and I am going to be the bad cop here. So this is actually before this weekend, but I have included this weekend in the statistics because it's rather damning for Sergio.
I will first of all say that this weekend, outside of the sprint race, this weekend, the Grand Prix, I would not count towards anything in statistics because I feel that some drivers have just struggled more in these conditions, and I don't think that's the fault of the driver.
Well, maybe it would contribute towards towards the circumstances I'm about to give you.
It's probably contributes, but I will completely ignore anything from this weekend because these are some of the most, these are the fittest athletes on the planet, really. These guys are fighter pilots. That's what they are. This is the level they're trained to. But yeah, Sergio Perez from Miami, Tim, take it away.
So I saw a stat the other day. Actually, no, it must include this race because it was 12 races, which is what we've had from after the Miami Grand Prix. So not including Miami, where Sergio qualified first and came second. This is from the Miami Grand Prix or the race after the Miami Grand Prix until now, which is Qatar. And the initial stat that I just saw was the average qualifying positions of Gasly in his 12 race stint at Red Bull, which is the same amount of races as Perez has done since Miami. Albon in his 17 races for Red Bull in 2020, and Perez this season in his 12 races since Miami. And it was the average qualifying position. And it really stuck out to me. So in 12 races in 2019, Gasly had an average qualifying position of 8.25. Albon had an average qualifying position of 7.35 on the grid. Since Miami, after the flag in Miami, Perez's average qualifying position over 12 races is 9.91 up until this weekend. And this is in the most dominant Red Bull car, the most dominant car that Red Bull has had out of those 3 seasons, by quite a way, which I don't think anyone can disagree with.
Which is why I have to say, of those stats there, even though Albon is slightly ahead of Gasly in those stats, Gasly was the one that was the most impressive because that was the third fastest car on the grid when Gasly had the controls, as opposed to a comfortable second fastest car on the grid in 2020.
We will get into that because there's a Verstappen comparison coming up. So,
there's no. What do you mean? He qualified an average position of first. Well done.
No, but when you look at it in the Gasly and Albon stakes as well comparison. So in that time, the 12 races for Gasly average qualified 8th, Verstappen average qualified 3.8. So let's call it 4th. Albon across that season average qualifying 7th, Verstappen average qualifying 3rd, and Verstappen average qualifying since Miami of 1.4. 2 races where he's been qualified second, and the Singapore Grand Prix where he qualified fifth.
Sorry, what was it when Albon was in the car?
When Albon was in the car, Verstappen's average was 3.06 and Albon's was 7.35 qualifying.
Oh, I thought you said 3.6.
No.
I was gutted. I was
Not
gutted.
great,
I was
not
going to say it's
terrible.
not great, not terrible.
But yeah, so based on those stats, my argument is going to be, why are they keeping Perez for next season?
Well, I am going to say one thing here, that Perez before Miami was exceptional. He did exactly and he was always in a position where if the team needed him to do something like hold up Hamilton, he could do it. Whereas Albon and Gasly were never in that position. Second of all, what is the one thing Perez has not done since Miami, which has been, has not done to this level as Gasly and Albon both did throughout their stint in Red Bull?
Are you going to bring up the fact about them getting lapped by Verstappen? Or are you going to bring that?
I'm going to bring up how often they crashed on their own. Albon had a lot of crashes.
He did indeed.
A lot. And so did Gasly. The thing with Albon was this was coming at a time when the cost cap was coming in. And if you're going to be fighting for a championship, the last thing you want is someone who's taking $2 million out of your catering budget every 6 weeks.
Okay, I will counter the Albon thing with looking at Perez in the last few races. We've said the sprint race wasn't his fault this weekend, but if you look, did he not cause collisions at both Singapore, multiple collisions, tried to kill Alex Albon, and also collisions at Suzuka, where he tried to dive bomb Kevin Magnussen. So he is getting to the point where Albon was, where he is now getting desperate and making mistakes trying to make up for it. Is my argument here.
It's desperation. And it is desperation because when you're in the Red Bull meat grinder, you don't really get a second chance. We've got F1's equivalent of Joe Biden as your team principal, and by that I mean a man who's on the warpath constantly, who's suffering from probably dementia. Sorry, that's harsh.
I'm trying not to make the joke that we fucking said we weren't going to make a joke about.
No.
You brought it up. Now I'm gonna take it.
No, Tim. We don't discuss.
Too soon.
Too soon. Right. It's always too soon. But pretty much, Helmut Marko seems like he forgets the driver's name and he goes, "Well, screw this. I'm just going to sack him." And then I won't have to remember his name. I mean, he's probably gone through more junior drivers than Chelsea have gone through players.
Yeah, they've probably got as many on loan as well to other teams in the lower divisions.
Yeah. How's Dan Ticktum going? Who? He's one of your drivers, is he? To quote a Pochettino interview about Manganang Sar, wasn't it? Anyway, we're getting sidetracked. Tim,
can I now bring into this the race points scored over the same time period? And again, I'm going to stress Perez is in a much better car compared to the rest of the field than both Gasly and Albon were. So, in the 12 races that Gasly had, he had a quite measly, I will admit, 63 points scored, and it was an average of 5 points a race, or 5.25 points a race, which is not great on the surface. You then remember that in those 12 races, and how often have we seen this from a Perez Red Bull this season, was 2 mechanical failures, 1 crash that was his fault, and 1 crash that was not his fault.
The answer to that, I believe there's been 1 mechanical failure for Perez this season.
Was that since Miami?
Since Miami, yeah.
Since Miami, okay. So you could argue that.
And even then, he wasn't running. And even then, to back your point up, he wasn't really running competitively.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're gonna increase that average, both of the times that he had mechanicals, he was running in the points, but not right at the front. So you could probably add points for 2 of those races. You then had Alex Albon, and admittedly, I didn't look at how many retirements he had because it was a lot easier to look
say
for a
the
whole
races
season.
that he finished.
It was a lot easier to go for a whole season. Oh, sorry. In that time, so Gasly scored 63 points, Max scored 181. So he's at 3 times what Gasly was scoring, with Gasly having 4 retirements in those 12 races. Alex Albon, in the 17 races, scored 105 points at an average of 6.1 points per race. And as Risa said, had several accidents, incidents, failures, 2 collisions with Lewis, one at Brazil and one at Austria, which were both not his fault. And Max scored 214 points. So Max is actually scoring just more than double what Albon is scoring. Since Miami, excluding sprint races, because for those who are Drive to Survive viewers, there wasn't sprint races until 2022. So I've taken out all of the sprint race points that Max would have earned and that Perez would have earned. So since Miami, Perez has got 104 points, excluding sprint races, and Max has scored 309 points, excluding sprint races. So basically, if you take out the 2 mechanical errors, or one of the crashes, or the 2 mechanical errors that Gasly had, Perez is performing worse than Albon did across the season, and then across the 12 races, and then also performing probably about the level of Gasly.
I just want to come here and say just the Alex Albon thing. He actually only had 1 retirement during a race in 2021, and that was the Eiffel Grand Prix.
Oh yes, the one at the when Ricciardo got his podium.
Believe so. Yeah, that was the one
In the Renault.
He also only had 4 finishes outside the points.
What, Albon?
Albon.
Yeah. So my argument here, the point of these stats, is that I don't know how, with 3 drivers that Red Bull obviously think could be in the car for 2025, because they wouldn't be giving Ricciardo another season ahead of Lawson if they didn't think there was a potential for Ricciardo to show what he has to move back up. Why do you not have all 3 drivers in your cars next year? If you're going Tsunoda, Ricciardo and Lawson, why are you giving Perez another year?
I'll share theory number 1. Theory number 1.
It's a blip.
It's a blip. Okay. We saw it with Bottas. He struggled, not to the extent of Perez, granted, but maybe he just needs to see the right person to get himself in the headspace. 2.
Theory number 2.
Perez is seasoned in Formula 1. He's negotiated deals with teams to keep himself in Formula 1, even when he's had a poor season like he did at McLaren. Now, Red Bull contracts are a nightmare. We know that. The best driver that Red Bull have had in that car alongside Max Verstappen has been Daniel Ricciardo, and he left on his own accord. What's the odds that Perez has just got better lawyers who was able to draw up a better contract that's a bit more watertight, that means he will actually stay in that car for the rest of the term or be paid quite the hefty release fee?
Potentially. This is definitely, I feel like this has got more weight than your first theory. But if you are a company the size of Red Bull, with the money that Red Bull have, and given what we saw, that there is a precedent for giving a driver a big payoff, which is what McLaren did last year, and look how that is playing out now with Piastri beating Norris. Who would have thought at the start of the season that Piastri would be beating Norris for podiums before the end of the year and consistently racing side by side with him or just behind him or occasionally beating him? I don't. It's the best performance from a rookie that I've seen in a long time, and it's showing that if you give a young guy a chance again in a front running car, they can take it to the establishment. They can take it to the guys that are already there. You saw Piastri beat Verstappen at the weekends, and yeah, they might not have a driver that could beat Verstappen on his day, but you might have a driver that will be a hell of a lot closer.
That's true. Theory number 3. It doesn't matter how much money you have at Red Bull, when your second driver is backed by the 8th richest man in the world with a net worth of 78 billion, it's a bit hard to say no.
I will concede that. I was going to go with when your driver is backed by a Central American drug lord, but we can take your diplomatic approach, Reese.
Hey, look, it's all agriculture, okay? It's all agriculture.
Supporting the farmers.
Exactly, you got to support the farmers. You know who else?
Fair trade cocaine for the world.
No. Okay. No, it's... Oh.
And we're off the air in Mexico.
We were never on the air in Mexico.
Yeah, because I keep bashing Sergio Perez.
No, I mean, there are reasons to keep Perez. Absolutely, glaring reasons. One, of course, sporting point. It could be a blip. 2, loyalty. He blooming did do a lot for Verstappen that year to get him a title. 3, being of course, the contract potentially being better than that of Albon and Gasly, and 4 being, the special agriculture money. There's lots of ways you can look at this and say, why is he still there? But you've got Daniel Ricciardo, looked sharp ever since getting back into Formula One. Yuki Tsunoda, even though this is probably the worst AlphaTauri he's had to deal with, I'd say it's been his best and most consistent season. And Liam Lawson has absolutely shone in the 4 races he's had an opportunity. Even Christian Horner is, I say even Christian Horner, he's always full of praise for Red Bull drivers, usually Verstappen. But as you would be when he keeps winning, he's been absolutely full of praise for Liam Lawson. And you do wonder why not?
Why not? Why not give someone, even if you give them a 1-year contract and you say if it doesn't work out, you could be back in the AlphaTauri in 2025. If you're Lawson, for example,
I wouldn't put Lawson in the Red Bull because we've seen what happens when they promote drivers too fast.
Would you put Tsunoda in there then? Because
because Tsunoda's been doing it for a long time.
I think Ricciardo needs to prove it that he's still got it. He looked decent in the races that he did, but it wasn't enough of a sample size.
It's all coming down to the year after. I think the year after you will see Ricciardo in there. I think as good as Lawson is, they will not put him in a Red Bull in 2025. Just categorically, he won't. He will have a seat in 2025. There's no way he doesn't. But he's only got one option for this season, upcoming season, and he's already turned it down. Apparently, he's already said he's not considering Williams.
But I think that's because he's looking at this and he's going, if 6-7 races into next season, Perez is still floundering, are they going to promote an AlphaTauri driver, and am I going to be back in the AlphaTauri seat, having not been locked into a contract elsewhere? And if I'm Lawson, that's what I'm looking for. I would, given I know that you might say the Williams is a faster car at the moment, and you might say that Sargent is struggling and Albon's showing what it can do on a regular basis. I honestly believe that Lawson will. He's spoken so much about Red Bull have supported him, they've stuck by him. He's not one of those that's been dropped and brought back to the system. He's actually someone that in Formula 3 and in Formula 2 has taken a year or two each time to get going. And Red Bull have said every time, yeah, we believe in you. You're going to be one of our guys of the future, which we've seen the Red Bull meat grinder. We've seen what it's done to everyone from Buemi to Kvyat to Bourdais to Alguersuari, DJ Jaime Alguersuari, by the way, to Brendan Hartley, who's friend of the podcast, Brendan Hartley. We've seen what it's done.
Top bloke, sorry.
Yeah, we've seen, as I said, friend of the podcast.
I say absolutely top bloke.
We've seen what it's done to so many drivers, and that's not including the list of drivers who they've dropped while in F2. You mentioned Dan Ticktum earlier on. Yes, he's got his mental problems, but
Dick Tantrum,
a brilliantly quick driver on his day, and they've never turned their back on Lawson when he's had his struggles through F3 and F2, and when he's had his poor weekends or his even not competing to win a championship season finishes. And there's a sense of loyalty in that. So I actually agree with Lawson's decision right now, because I think Lawson thinks he's going to be back in the Red Bull car before the middle of next season. And it's based on what Perez is doing.
I get that, but I feel like, we saw it with Nick De Vries. They spat him out, and some people wanted De Vries, some people didn't. And Horner was the one who just said, yeah, I got it wrong with De Vries.
No, it wasn't. It was Marco who said he got it wrong. Horner said he didn't want De Vries, and Marco overruled.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, no, Horner didn't want De Vries. Marco got it wrong.
And Franz Tost didn't want De Vries either, because Franz Tost wanted Logan Sargent. No, didn't want. He wanted Colton Herta from IndyCar.
Yeah.
And the FIA put a spanner in the works there. Who's the better driver, Colton Herta or De Vries? That's a decision for another day, or a discussion for another day. But
it's a very short discussion. It's Colton Herta.
Exactly. But he doesn't qualify for a super license because he wasn't in F2, which is ridiculous. I struggle to see the long-term benefit to AlphaTauri, to Red Bull, and the careers of the the 3 drivers that Red Bull clearly see as there being one of them as their potential Red Bull driver in the future, other than maybe several £million, which Red Bull can afford, regardless of what you think of Red Bull. Yeah, they can afford more than what McLaren paid Danny Rick. Yeah,
of course. Well, we said we don't know how good that contract is from Perez. It could be like, pay us back every single penny we've ever invested in you. At which point you'd be like, shoot, that's a lot of silverware. And yeah, I completely agree. Liam Lawson deserves a seat in Formula One. Unfortunately, there's certain people who are wasting said seat. I know we were going to take. I said I'm taking the race out of consideration when I say about people's performance, but Lance Stroll this weekend. The other thing that has to be said was he got knocked out in Q1 of both sprint and regular qualifying, and after regular qualifying, his own trainer came up to him. I don't know exactly what happened, but then it led to the two walking off a little bit, and then Stroll, lashing out and pushing him, shoving him away. You're meant to set an example, and everyone wanted to throw a book at Verstappen when he pushed Ocon. Lance Stroll pushing his trainer, I thought was completely out of order. And it's lucky it's Daddy's team, because if it wasn't Daddy's team, there's absolutely no way. I mean, if you're talking about people who are underperforming in comparison to their teammate, Fernando Alonso has completely shown up Lance Stroll all season long since maybe Australia.
Yeah, I do agree. And maybe we saw it with how Stroll said he had the blurred vision and said that he struggled with the conditions. I actually think that Lance Stroll, when you look at his career, some of the hits that he has taken, probably the one that I always come back to is the hit that he took in Mugello back in 2020. And I've said this on the podcast before. He came back, and the weekend after, he drove, I think it was back-to-back races, or maybe it was a 2-week gap. And he was told by a doctor after that race he shouldn't have raced the race that he came back after that hit. And if you look at his career and his performances in not the biggest cars, not the best cars, in underperforming cars, since before Mugello and then since Mugello, and maybe this is another spreadsheet that I can do for a future podcast, but I'm convinced that if you went back through it, you would see that as the drop-off. And since then, he has had hit after hit after hit, probably one or two a season, of big impacts, big collisions, usually involving no one else. And I think that the physical stress and the physical toll that is having on his body, and we saw it yesterday, he knew he needed the ambulance straight away. And I didn't, other than Sargent, who had thrown up and wasn't very well, I'm convinced that Stroll knows he's got an issue. And the rumours of him retiring, I suspect his health is going to be a massive part of that as well. I don't think it's all down to actually a lack of ability that he ever had. I think it's a lack of ability that all of these collisions, all of these hits are adding up, and they're just affecting him more and more. Every time he takes another one, it seems to drop off even worse.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because, of course, he is a driver that's always shown flashes. Since that Mugello hit, of course, there was the Turkish Grand Prix in that year where he put the car on pole position. There have been flashes.
But since the end of 2020, where have the flashes been? The race that Perez won, was that in 2021 or was that that was 2020, wasn't it? When he got the podium at Sakir on the Squoval. And even that, he was miles. Like, Perez was at the back of the grid, and he passed his teammate halfway through the race. I almost think that he, for himself, whether it's a year break, whether it's a retirement from racing and he goes into something else, I think he needs to stop racing. And there might come a point when he has an accident and he either seriously injures himself or someone else, and he actually gets told, no, you have to stop, whether it's by medics, whether it's by the sport. And I'd hate for it to come to that. I think that definitely right now it's not there.
Going back to your point on Lance Stroll and Mugello, of course, retired in Mugello, but the race that followed Mugello, retired in Russia, withdrawn in the Eiffel Grand Prix, retired in Portugal, 13th in Imola, then, of course, pole position in Turkey, but dropped down to 9th, retired in Bahrain.
They got his tyre strategy wrong, didn't they?
Yeah, retired in Bahrain. But then you saw Sakir, 3rd place with Lance Stroll. And then you saw, you talk about flashes this season, Bahrain. That was, in my opinion, that was a flash. There's no way Lance Stroll should have put that performance in after that injury.
I will also say with Bahrain, where were McLaren in Bahrain? Where were Ferrari in Bahrain? Where were the other team? The Aston Martin, in comparison to every other car on the grid other than Red Bull, was the better car in Bahrain across that weekend. And maybe it was...
But Lance Stroll came into that race having done no testing.
Yeah, but maybe the car was just that far ahead of the Mercedes and the Ferraris and the McLarens and the rest of the grid at that point, that the raw talent that he does still have was enough to get him Was it fifth place he finished in Bahrain? I think fifth was it was fifth. Yeah. So I think great. And also he might have gone into that weekend fresh off the fact that he hadn't done a race for a while and with a point to prove, to say, right, I need to show them that I can race this weekend, and maybe that gave him something extra. Because we were all sitting here waxing lyrical about him over Bahrain, and I think the only other time he's beaten Alonso in a straight fight since was Barcelona. And Alonso said, I'm going to sit here and not pass to you because the team need the points, when he could have driven straight past him.
I don't know if that was completely true. I think that Lance had only in his back pocket that day. But you say about flashes and stuff like that. You say, oh yeah, but he had the superior car in Bahrain. Well, what about about last season when that Aston Martin was a dog of a car? He still dragged it to sixth in Singapore. Granted, there wasn't much outside of a 10th place finish for the rest of the season.
Yeah, but he's still capable of the one race here or there. But in that Aston Martin, he should be doing better.
Compared to Alonso, he's nowhere near. But
yeah,
I'm not trying to defend Lance Stroll here, because I have the mindset that if he wasn't, if it wasn't Daddy's team, he wouldn't have this drive anymore.
I'm defending him I'm not defending the results, because I don't think he should be in the car next season based on the results. But I am defending the reason for those results and the reason that he shouldn't be in the car. And I think that the reason he shouldn't be in the car should have a lot more understanding and sympathy than, oh, he's a shit driver, which is what you get countless people on social medias, countless people who talk about F1 in their day-to-day lives. They see, oh, he's that far down the grid in qualifying, that far down the grid in the race. Oh, his daddy's money got him into the sport. Yes, his daddy's money helped him get into the sport, but he's the second youngest podium sitter in a dog shit Williams. He's the third youngest front row sitter, and I think like the fifth or sixth youngest pole sitter, isn't he? He showed he had it at the start of his career that he could have done that more consistently.
He was never going to be the driver that went from, he got his lucky break and he's now going to be at the front of the grid, whatever machinery if you put him in some good machinery. He was never going to be that guy. He was always going to be that mid-table driver. But the thing is with Lance Stroll, when you saw him come into the sport and we go, oh, look, he's crashed in practice. Oh, he's crashed in practice again. Oh, he's crashed in testing. Haha, this is hilarious. Oh, look, he's doing laps in a Formula One car that's 3 years old, so he can get some mileage and learn how to drive these things. To think where he came from to being the youngest podium sitter in Formula One
at the time.
When you think at the time, well, I don't know, he still is he not?
No, Verstappen.
No, I'm sure Lance made his debut after Verstappen.
Yeah, but Lance is younger than Verstappen.
Yeah, exactly. But Lance made his debut in 2017. Verstappen had already won a race by then.
Lance is the second youngest. He was the second youngest at the time then. Only by 12 days, though.
Who from?
Verstappen. Verstappen was 18 years, 7 months and 15 days, and Lance was 18 years, 7 months and 27 days.
But still, to go from the guy who literally had a website about how much he was going to crash to, the second youngest podium sitter. You look at the other guys who have struggled when they've come into the sport. You look at Logan Sargent. You look at Mick Schumacher. You look at Latifi. You look at
De Vries.
De Vries. You look at Mazepin. These guys who, some of these have been comical. Oh, look, he's terrible. He's going to keep crashing. Like some of them not comical because no one wanted Mick Schumacher to keep crashing. It was funny when Mazepin did it. It wasn't funny when Mick did it. It's become one of these things that, like, he has always shown these flashes, and he was not a waste of a seat then.
Yeah.
But now he is, because when you look at who his junior is, who the guy below him is in that team, it's the Formula 2 champion Felipe Drugovich.
Yeah, exactly. So the reigning F2 champion is sitting there at the start of his career, and Lance Stroll taking a seat at what feels like the end of his career, or at least a career that needs a break.
It feels like Lance Stroll is going to retire before Fernando Alonso.
It wouldn't surprise me. Again, though, I could see Lance, and I could also see Lance going to maybe not an IndyCar series, but a sports car series and doing really, really well. I think he's an endurance racing driver, or a driver where you can still drive at high speed in a series, but not have to deal with the mental toll of being in the Formula One spotlight every week, and also the physical toll of being on the edge with those G-forces and taking those hits week in, week out.
don't be surprised if one day you read that Lance Stroll has won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Is pretty much what we're saying.
In an Aston Martin designed by Adrian Newey, which is coming in 2 years' time, by the way, boys and girls. What an exciting prospect that is. An Aston Martin so Adrian Newey designed a concept car when Red Bull and Aston Martin had their partnership. And Aston Martin are now going to put that into production and enter it in the hypercar series.
It's going to be nuts. But this is the thing. Lance Stroll is that driver that you look at with where could Liam Lawson fit in? You'd go, well, that seems like the one that makes sense. If you're not going to get rid of Logan Sargent, he won't take Logan Sargent's seat.
But if you're Red Bull, you send Perez to that seat. Gives him a drive, and you get to keep the young driver or one of the drivers in your family. But does then Perez want to go back to dealing with Papa Stroll and the team that booted him after they won him a race?
This sounds like a Brad Pitt movie. This does. He struggled. He's come from the fastest team to the worst team on the grid. Of course, not the worst team anymore.
And with the veteran driver there to help him.
Exactly. Mind you, I'm going to say one thing right now. We laugh about the worst team on the grid and stuff like that. We've walked for a long time. We've said it's Alfa Romeo. Who got double points this weekend, Tim?
Get in the Bottas.
Beg your pardon?
Yep, the Botties. Get in the Botties.
Yeah, get in the Bottas, he said.
He was on fire, wasn't he? Valtteri all weekends.
I mean, he nearly was with the temperatures in the car.
He complained about we're talking about drivers. He complained on the radio about the conditions at the end of the race. But yeah, brilliant weekend for them. They were so. Have you seen the video of them back in their motorhome or their team home for the weekend after it? And every single mechanic and every single hospitality personnel and every single linked person to that team had the biggest smiles on their faces. And it was because I think it was double points as well. Again, Lance Stroll's penalty getting Zhou the 10th place.
I just want to play a bit tin hat here. Other than Fernando Alonso's hot bum message, I didn't really hear much in the race until Logan Sargent retired about the conditions. But it was an issue throughout, and I just wonder if drivers did complain more and if it just wasn't put on the world feed. So
for the Ocon example, he said on his in-lap, I haven't told you this, but I fixed in my helmet on lap 15. So maybe the drivers didn't want to show weakness in that moment. That's a very driver mentality, I think, to have, would be to not show it. And
you don't want to look weak.
Yeah.
But when you watched all these guys do their interviews after the race,
it was universal.
It was, they all looked terrible. I mean, have you seen the video of Lewis going over to George and going, hey, well done today, and George Russell going, oh, I'm sorry about the start, and then Lewis Hamilton said, don't apologise, it was my fault.
Yeah.
But when you saw George in that video, he looked awful.
Yeah, he looked awful. He still looked awful when he was talking to Sky as well, which was a good 45 minutes to an hour after the race, probably, when that happened, and because he was one of the last ones to go there. Yeah, it's tricky conditions. And hopefully, when we go back to Qatar in the end of November, start of December next year, we'll have tyres that work, the conditions will be cooler. And do you know what? I love, if it wasn't for the heat, I would love the physical test and the physicality of that racetrack. I think it's wide, it's modern, it's got, I know you might not like, it's got safe runoff that's gravel tracks.
I love a gravel trap. I am a big fan of a gravel trap. I'm just going to say right now, because we do need to sort of wrap this up, because we've gone for quite a while, and Dan's going to have a lot of editing to do, even if the podcast isn't that long.
The start of this was an absolute mess. You won't have heard it, but
we didn't even record the first 20 minutes because of how much of a mess we were. But I'm just going to say right now, we touched on it earlier. The 18 lap stints and the fact that the drivers have to do qualifying laps over and over and over again. I feel like in a management race, Verstappen cruises to a win of 20-25 seconds, no matter how good Piastri is. With the fact that they had to do mandatory pit stops every 18 laps and they were pushing and pushing and pushing, I think that led to closer, better racing, because guys were going, I need to go as fast as I can. And so you need to be out of my way so I can go as fast as I can.
we've seen in qualifying this season how close is qualifying week in, week out when all the cars are at the limit or all the cars are on the edge. We've seen it week in, week out. We've seen the Ferraris and the Hasses when they don't have to worry about tyre wear. I know the Hasses still fell apart anyway this week because of the heat, but we've seen that it's so close when the cars are all at their maximum performance. And yes, the Red Bull is still the fastest car, but it's a damn sight closer than it is over 50, 60 laps of management. And yeah, I fully agree. I also, just mentioning the tyres, I love the discrepancy in the fall off, the ultimate speed of the soft tyre and the long lastingness of the medium tyre in the sprint races. That is what I want to see in a tyre discrepancy. I want to see a soft tyre that can be 2-3 seconds a lap quicker, but only last 10 laps. And then falls apart. I then want to see a hard tyre that might be 3 to 4 seconds a lap slower, but could go through the entire race without you having to stop. And the medium tyre probably 2 seconds. Like if you could have a 2 to 3 second gap between all of the tyre compounds, but have a soft tyre that falls apart after 10 laps, I think that would be brilliant.
This is what I was saying. The fact that drivers had to push and do these laps, I would love to see a race where they go, all right, Silverstone, mandatory race, mandatory longest you can do 18 laps. I reckon you would get an absolute belter of a race.
I don't know about maximum stint you can do, because that would in most cases eliminate a hard tyre. I hate the hard tyre. No, but I want the strategy to be worth it. So what I would like is a rule along the lines of, let's say you've got 3 compounds at a weekend like you have now. In the race, you have to use every compound for at least 10 laps.
The Chandok rule.
Yeah, you have to use every compound, so all 3 compounds for at least 10 laps, and increase the difference between the compounds.
When you say that, there have been races we've gone to where they go, oh shoot, these soft tyres only good for 7 laps. You know, I would say, use all 3 tyres. I think that would be brilliant. But
what you would end up with is you would end up people who use the soft tyre in some races for lap 1 and then pit, or you would end up with, I'm going to just pit for the hard tyre on the last lap when I'm 40 seconds ahead and I'm Max Verstappen. I don't think that. I honestly believe that you need a minimum stint length for all 3 types of tyre to be worn. Otherwise, you're going to have 1 lap on the softs at the start of an end of a race, or 1 lap on a hard at the start of the end of the race, and it will defeat the object.
Yeah, I completely agree, but I think you've also got to take into consideration that there are going to be times where someone might have fewer tyres, get a puncture, or something like that, or the fact that the guys who are slower down have to use their soft tyres more, or often run out of tyres, and F1's trying to go cost neutral and get over the facts. What I'd like to see, which is just a good way of just doing things. We all hated. Do you remember when you used to get freedom choice of tyre when you qualified out the top 10, and so drivers would say it was a good thing I qualified 11th.
Yep.
That's up there with how annoying the words well managed are at the end of a race. I feel like if anyone comes on the radio and says well managed, that driver should be disqualified from the race.
Well managed, Max. You won your championship by managing.
Well, he has won his championship by managing. But could you just imagine if you just go well managed? Oh, you idiot! And he's out. He's like it just the words well managed. I hate it about football. I feel like your pinnacle motorsport, and just go as fast as you can. I feel like you would make the sport so much. I mean, this was enjoyable because you saw the guys on the limit. You saw mistakes being made in the early parts of the race because the guys were pushing.
Yeah,
they were pushing, and this is the thing. You've taken the way that not having refueling and Pirelli making the tyres in a certain way has taken away the need to push. You will never see another Schumacher in Manicourt.
Alonso versus Schumacher at Imola. It's the one that I always think back to.
Yeah, where both guys had to go on the limit, like push everything. You don't get it. Like crossover in tyres is brilliant, but Let's have it so guys are pushing like crazy, and the strategy crossover isn't 1 or 2 stop, it's 3 or 4 stop.
Yeah, there were a lot of arguments against the tyre war, but a tyre war with tyres where you could push them every lap would push the other manufacturer to have to do the same. Otherwise, you lose the tyre war.
Yeah,
I agree.
Anyway, we really do need to wrap it up because, it's that point where we record for so long. Dan's gonna be like, "Oh my goodness, how am I going to edit this?" But speaking of wrapping things up, I got a text on the weekend from my girlfriend asking, "Can we decorate the house for Christmas?" And I said, "No, absolutely not. It's still October. Are you crazy?" But if you are going to wrap something up, then maybe wrap up a gift perfect for any F1 fan, brought to you by sponsor of the podcast, Apex Tracks. With some wonderful 3D printed track wall art, you could give a family, friend, or loved one exactly what they wanted. 3D printed track wall art of their favorite racetrack. So for all your 3D printed track wall art needs, head to apextracks.com. That's apextraxs.com.
I will also add that if you buy them a Qatar Grand Prix track wall art, then next year the race is on the 1st of December, so you can add that to your Christmas decorations.
Big smart move. We will just say right now, the Apex tracks are fantastic, but they will not be making if you buy the track wall art and then the FIA decide to make the track 80 centimeters narrower, that may not be replicated on the 3D printed track wall art. But anyway, until next time, thank you very much for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It has just sort of turned into 2 old mates chatting about F1 for nearly 80 minutes. Don't know how long this podcast is going to be when it gets out to you, but if you do like hearing what you've heard today, check out our socials. You can get involved in the chats which we're in. We give each other shit in there too, so you can get involved in that too. There's a link in the bio of the podcast that will always have all that information. But until next time, from me and Tim, cheerio guys.
So long.